Nobody sabotages their future because they don't care. They sabotage it because progress feels like a threat. There's a quiet moment most people never talk about, the moment when life finally begins to change. A new opportunity appears, your habits improve, or your financial situation begins to grow. Instead of excitement, something inside you resists. Your energy drops, focus becomes fragile, and small distractions suddenly feel irresistible. You scroll longer than you planned, delay important work, or find comfort in routines you thought you had outgrown. It doesn't feel like fear, it feels like exhaustion or confusion. Slowly, comfort pulls you back into a life that feels familiar, even if it isn't fulfilling. And what looks like a lack of discipline is often your brain trying to protect you from the discomfort of becoming someone new. The subtle retreat into comfort. That moment can look incredibly ordinary. Someone finally gets accepted into graduate school after years of trying, and suddenly they start procrastinating on enrollment paperwork. A young entrepreneur launches a product that begins gaining traction, and instead of pushing forward, they begin doubting every decision they make. An employee finally gets a promotion they worked toward for years, and within weeks they feel overwhelmed, anxious, and secretly wish things could go back to how they were before. None of these reactions come from a lack of ambition. They come from the sudden psychological shock of growth. When growth feels strange, many people remember a time when they were close to a breakthrough and something unexpected happened internally. Maybe you planned to wake up early to work on a project that mattered deeply to you, but instead you felt unusually tired. Maybe you told yourself you would start investing or managing your money more intentionally, yet you found yourself avoiding your financial apps or ignoring emails about opportunities. The resistance felt subtle, almost invisible, but powerful enough to derail momentum. You didn't decide consciously to stop progressing. It just happened. Comfort as a protective mechanism. Real life offers countless examples of this quiet retreat into comfort. A person starts attending networking events to grow their career, but after a few successful conversations, they suddenly stop showing up. Someone begins a strict saving plan, sees early results, and then impulsively spends money on things they don't truly need. A writer finally gains recognition for their work, only to find themselves unable to start their next project because the pressure feels heavier than before. In each of these scenarios, the internal narrative sounds similar. I don't know why I'm doing this. I know I want more, but something just feels off. Why this matters now. Modern culture tells people that success should feel empowering and exciting, but real growth often feels heavy and uncomfortable. The human brain is built for stability, not rapid transformation. When routines change or expectations rise, your internal system interprets uncertainty as potential danger. Even positive change can trigger stress because it requires new behaviors, new identities, and new emotional risks. This is why success can feel more painful than failure. Failure is familiar, comfort is predictable, growth is unknown. People assume something is wrong with them when resistance appears, but resistance is often a sign that the brain is trying to maintain balance. Common advice fails because it treats discomfort as an enemy instead of information. Understanding the psychological roots of comfort changes how you interpret your own struggles and helps you see resistance as part of the process, rather than proof of weakness. The illusion of effortless success. Think about how social media amplifies this misunderstanding. When you scroll through curated posts of people celebrating promotions, business milestones, or financial freedom, it creates an expectation that growth should feel effortless and rewarding. Few highlight the quiet inner battles, the self-doubt, procrastination, and emotional tension that accompany real progress. When a young professional sees peers achieving milestones, they might assume something is wrong with themselves for feeling hesitant, overwhelmed, or anxious. But these feelings are universal. They are part of the transition from old identity to new identity. Stress in modern work and life. The workplace is full of such scenarios. Someone promoted to a leadership role may experience decision fatigue, hesitation in guiding teams, or fear of making the wrong call. Entrepreneurs often feel more stress after initial business success than during the early uncertain stages because increased visibility, responsibility, and expectations trigger intense emotional responses. Students entering new careers, athletes advancing to professional leagues, or anyone stepping into a new level of personal or financial growth face similar patterns. Recognizing this framework helps you interpret resistance as a signal rather than a flaw, transforming internal conflict into a roadmap for personal understanding. The psychology behind comfort. Daniel and the safety of predictability. Daniel works in a stable corporate environment where every day follows a predictable rhythm. When he is offered the chance to lead a major project, he expects excitement but instead feels pressure and hesitation. He delays preparation and distracts himself with minor tasks, often busying himself with irrelevant work. His brain is not rejecting success, It is reacting to uncertainty. Predictable environments feel safe because they are familiar, while new challenges introduce unknown expectations and the risk of visible failure. Comfort equals certainty. Growth equals unpredictability. The brain gravitates toward what feels emotionally safe, even when it undermines long-term potential. Identity friction in health and fitness. Maya's experience shows how identity friction drives resistance. She decides to transform her health by committing to a consistent fitness routine. The first few weeks feel energizing, but after work, fatigue and subtle anxiety emerge. She negotiates with herself to skip sessions and rationalizes rest over action. Her struggle is not a failure of discipline. Her previous identity revolved around comfort, rest, and avoidance of physical strain. Her new identity demands effort, delayed gratification, and confrontation with discomfort. The brain attempts to restore equilibrium by nudging her toward familiar habits that offer immediate relief. Comfort behaviors provide short-term emotional rewards, while growth requires patience and persistence. Recognizing this dynamic reframes procrastination as a natural part of identity evolution, financial growth, and anxiety. Alex's story demonstrates financial resistance. After increasing his income through freelance work, Alex expects security but experiences anxiety. He avoids reviewing his finances, undercharges clients, and hesitates to make investment decisions. Financial growth introduces not just responsibility, but deeper questions about worth, trust, and stability. For those who grew up with scarcity, prosperity triggers ancient survival instincts. The brain reduces perceived risk by nudging individuals back toward familiar patterns. Comfort becomes a protective mechanism, even when it prevents optimal progress. The hidden fear of success. There is also a quieter force at play, the fear of success itself. A young professional receives recognition at work, but begins to feel isolated from peers and overwhelmed by rising expectations. She works longer hours, becomes exhausted, and starts missing deadlines. Without realizing it, her brain is trying to restore emotional balance by returning her to familiar roles. Success changes identity and relationships, and the discomfort often comes not from the work itself, but from the transformation it requires. The turning point. Eventually, a quiet realization begins to emerge. Nothing is wrong with you for feeling resistance. Your brain is designed to protect stability and reduce uncertainty. The discomfort you feel is not proof that you are incapable. It is evidence that your identity is expanding beyond its previous boundaries. Instead of asking why you lack discipline, a more compassionate question appears. Okay, what part of you is trying to stay safe? Identity is shaped by repetition and familiarity, and rapid change naturally creates internal tension. The turning point happens when success stops feeling like a battle against yourself and starts becoming a process of understanding your internal patterns. Curiosity replaces shame, and awareness replaces self-criticism. Progress becomes less about force and more about alignment with who you are becoming. Reframing resistance as growth. This shift applies to multiple life domains: mid-career professionals retraining in new industries, parents returning to education, athletes advancing to higher competition. All experience initial hesitation. The discomfort they feel is a sign their identity is stretching. Understanding this allows them to act with awareness instead of self-judgment. Identity expansion becomes less threatening when observed with curiosity. Practical strategies. Working with the mind. Growth becomes more sustainable when you reduce psychological resistance instead of fighting it directly. Daniel began by contributing small ideas in meetings rather than forcing himself into overwhelming leadership roles, allowing his brain to experience manageable exposure to discomfort. Maya redefined comfort instead of eliminating it by creating calming rituals after workouts, allowing progress and emotional safety to coexist. Alex approached financial anxiety by scheduling short, predictable check-ins with his finances rather than avoiding them entirely, turning an overwhelming task into a familiar routine. Each of these strategies worked because they respected the brain's need for predictability and gradual adaptation rather than relying on extreme discipline or pressure. Micro-exposure and habit alignment. Other strategies include reframing discomfort as feedback, not threat. A side business builder can treat small setbacks as learning experiments. A student adjusting to a new academic environment can increase study sessions gradually. Habit stacking, micro-exposure, and incremental adaptation reduce resistance while aligning actions with identity. Over time, behaviors once threatening become normalized. Calm empowerment. Success feels painful not because you are unprepared, but because your brain is adjusting to unfamiliar territory. Comfort is not the enemy. It is a reflection of where your identity has lived for years. Growth becomes sustainable when understanding replaces force and when progress happens through small, consistent changes rather than dramatic transformation. You are not fighting your mind. You are retraining it to see expansion as safe. Over time, discomfort becomes less threatening because it becomes familiar, and progress begins to feel more natural and grounded. Progress through awareness. As familiarity grows, the internal friction that once derailed action diminishes. Confidence emerges from repeated exposure rather than dramatic breakthroughs. Emotional resilience strengthens. Identity expands naturally, and growth becomes a process of alignment rather than force. The next time resistance appears, pause before labeling it as failure. Observe it with curiosity and listen to what your mind is trying to protect. Growth often begins with quiet awareness rather than loud motivation. If this perspective changed how you see your struggles, continue exploring the deeper psychology behind habits, identity, and personal evolution. There is more clarity ahead, and understanding yourself is where meaningful progress truly begins.